One day I get a call from Howard Schultz and say, Howard says, Naveen, I want to come talk to you. I said, sure, come on over. And he said, we should buy Sonics. I said, oh, sure, let's go buy Sonics. I said, basketball team. Sounds interesting. How do they make money? And he said, no, they don't make money, they lose money. I'm puzzled now. It is about having those audacious dreams and making them happen. If you want to do a small good in the world, you give money. If you want to do large good in the world, you create profitable companies. I feel my biggest accomplishments in my life are really our children. Instead of leaving the better world for our children, I decided to leave the better children for this world because that's how we're going to change this world.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 7 of the Community Made podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaynard. In episode 6, I shared a candid conversation with two 8-figure entrepreneur friends of mine, Tony Guerrieri and Matthew Bertulli, both Italian stallions. Don't know why I threw that in there, but I decided to. We had a really great conversation about balancing the demands of parenting young children while building your company, working with family, the importance of relationships, questioning whether or not to scale, and developing a company culture that reflects your core values, which brings us to our last and final episode for season 1. And don't worry, there will be a season 2 in just a few short weeks. But I wanted to end on a high note. Actually, this was Christina's idea to end on a high note. I think I had this episode with Naveen Jain probably mid-season, and Christina says, Christina, who is running the podcast in essence, reached out to me and said, you know what, you should really end with Naveen Jain because you want to end on a high note. So this man has no limits. Ladies and gentlemen, Naveen Jain was the founder and former CEO of InfoSpace, one of the largest and very first .coms. Today, he's the co-founder and chairman of Moon Express, the first private company authorized to mine resources on the moon. He's on track, hopefully, to be the first trillionaire. If that works out, he serves as a member of the board for the X Prize and also heads up Viome, a company whose mission is to create a world where sickness is optional. Something to keep in mind is that Naveen grew up in poor, rural India. His father was so honest, he refused to make a profitable living through bribes and government corruption. Despite little education resources during his youth, he is one of the most successful men alive today, CEO of the first company licensed to mine for minerals on the moon, and one of the best public speakers I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. I heard him speak actually in 2011 in Joe Polish's Genius Network event, his 25K group, and Joe just stacks speakers. I mean, his events are very, very speaker driven, and Naveen, just outshined everybody. His energy is just absolutely infectious, and it's really hard not to listen to this and not feel like you're playing small on some level. So the reason I wanted to tie him into this season is listening to him really pushes us to flip the script on our notions of scaling, and not scaling for the fact of making more money, but for the fact of making more impact on civilization. That's the scope in which he kind of sees things through. And one of the things he always preaches is that, tackling problems takes a lot of energy, and it takes very little energy to tackle a big problem versus a small problem. So Naveen is all about the big problems, or big solutions, I guess you could say. As a quick side note, this Q&A was originally recorded at our most recent MMT event, meaning that if you want access to the unedited original video, you can get access by going to the Community Made group. If you're not a member, ladies and gentlemen, it's free. I've shared this before. It's free. If you're not a member, come on now. Simply visit communitymade.com to join. Enjoy this incredible episode with Naveen Jain.
All right. So, yesterday I was trying to be open and transparent that I was worried about Shep's Q&A because I knew him so well. I actually haven't been worried about this Q&A at all, even though I don't know Naveen all that well. Only because I feel like if I ask him a single question, he will go on for 45 minutes of just dropping wisdom bombs. If anybody knows him, or those who don't, he is a fire hose. He's a firecracker of inspiration and wisdom. And for context, I originally heard him speak in 2012. Joe Polish did an event with Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. And I mean, to date, I've listened to hundreds of talks. I've seen hundreds of talks live easily. Probably listened to thousands of podcast interviews and talks and that kind of stuff. And Naveen is in my top 5. And I share that because I don't even remember what he said. But as Maya Angelou once said, people will never forget. People will forget what you did, forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I remember when he was done his talk, and I'm like, I'm thinking way too small. I got to step up my game. The future is bright, and I'm proud to be an entrepreneur. So I'm going to go through a few of these accolades to kind of set some context, but I literally have 3 pages, and I'm not going through all of them. I'm sorry. So I tried to prioritize. So Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Albert Einstein's Technology Medal, first private company authorized to go to the moon, and that is for mining, which potentially can make you the first trillionaire, but I know you don't do this for the money. Most admired serial entrepreneur by Silicon India, sits on the board at X Prize. You're a faculty at Singularity University. You became a billionaire through several of your ventures, including Blue Dot, TalentWise, InfoSpace, and Intellis. Your new venture, Viome, is disrupting the healthcare, and you just launched this. Did you officially launch today?
Yep.
So you were just showing me a bunch of PR that came out today, so I want to be very respectful of his time so he can bask in all this PR that's going on. I can go on and on. We'll talk about a lot of these ventures. I was going to ask you where you're from, and I don't know necessarily where to start, but I will start this way, which may be a little bit of a curveball, but one does not become a billionaire and achieve all of this without making sacrifices. So what are some sacrifices you've made?
Well, to some extent, the sacrifices are only because you value something that you don't get. To me, I have never really made any sacrifices in my life because everything that I did because I wanted to do it exactly that way. I don't have any regrets of any type. So most people, when they're working very hard and they're trying to find this idea of family and work balance. And to me, that fundamentally tells you that if you're looking to balance something, those two things are somehow cannot live together. That's the reason you're trying to balance them. And I always felt that family and work is a continuum in life. There is sometimes more of one and sometimes there is more of other. But there is really never about you do this and then rest of the time you do this. You forget about the family when you're working, or when you're with the family you forget about work. That never happens. In fact, the people who claim they have a good family-work balance, I tell you they suck at both. Right? The work people think they don't work hard enough, and the family think they don't spend enough time with the family. So the idea is there are times when your family needs you, which happen to be at home, and there is time the family needs you, which happen to be at work. And they're both great families, and whosoever has the most need really gets catered to. So I really, to some extent, have absolutely no regrets in my life. I live my life every single day thinking, what would I do if that was my last day? And one of the things that I have really learned over the years is find something that you're willing to die for and then live for it. And if you can find something that you're willing to give your life for and make your mission in life to live to do that. And this is the most interesting thing when you ask everyone here in this room, what's one thing they would die for? If they have a children, they would tell you, I would die for my children. And imagine when you ask them what you do, they don't live for their children. They do everything to say, I told them to leave the house when they are 18, I want nothing to do with them. And they say they would die for something they can't live for. And that to me is really the biggest sacrifice you make when you start to feel that your accomplishments are you. I feel my biggest accomplishments in my life are really our children. Instead of leaving the better world for our children, I decided to leave the better children for this world because that's how we're going to change this world. As we go on, I'm going to tell you that, to some extent, it's not about what you tell them to do. It is what they see you do that matters the most. Parenting unfortunately doesn't come with the owner's manual. Here's who I am, mom and dad. This is how I work, right? You have to figure it out, and it's extremely counterintuitive. And this is probably not the right place or the things, but would love to share some of the things that I learned as a father and as a parent about what really works. So one of the things that I find personally that just has really changed our children and their lives has been, I said, our love for you is absolutely unconditional, but our approval is not. And think about that for a second. I'll always be there to love you and take care of you, but doesn't mean I'm going to be proud of you. And to be proud of you, you have to earn that day in, day out. And your job as a parent to simply let them know what makes you proud of them. And it doesn't matter what they tell you in response. They may tell you, whatever. Whatever is really the word that means I don't care, right? But they really means I wish you didn't say that, because the rest of my life I'll be chasing that dream to make you proud. And that's actually what happens, is that every single day. I remember my oldest son, he was 10 years old. He was born in 1990, he's 2000. And I just finished my CNBC interview. And the company that I started, it's probably crossed about 40 billion market cap. And I come home and he said, Dad, I'm going to make more money than you ever did. I could have put my arms around him and said, good luck, son. I didn't. I sat him down and I said, Uncle, I'm so surprised you look at the success in this way. Success will never be about how much money you have in the bank. It will always be about how many lives have you been able to change in this. And he looks at me and he says, whatever, Dad. And then I told him, I said, look, one day you will ask me, Dad, how would I ever know when I have become successful? And I told him there is a simple way of measuring when you have been successful. The day you become humble is the day you have become successful. If you still have an iota of arrogance left in you, that means you're still trying to prove something to yourself or someone else you're not successful. So think Donald Trump. He will never be successful.
So how many parents are in the room? So yeah, parenting is a good theme. I didn't write anything. I didn't prepare anything outside of an introduction and a lot of questions about parenting. That's because selfishly, that's what I want to hear. And I know you talk about exponential technologies and flying to the moon and all that kind of stuff. But a couple things. So what did you try to? What was important for you to instill in your children early on?
So it's really, a lot of the times the parents have this idea that if, many of us, including me, I came from extremely humble background. When I say humble, I really mean really very poor background. I grew up in India. We had absolutely no food to eat. We were poor. We were moving from villages to villages. And unfortunately, we didn't have to be poor. My dad had a good job in the government. But in India, there is so much corruption and bribery. He was supposed to make all his money through bribery. And my dad decided that he wasn't going to take any bribe. And that means we really didn't have any money. And that would have been the easiest part, because human body is really not designed to eat a lot. When we eat a lot, we all know what happens. We develop these love handles, right? But, food was not the problem. What happened is that the way the system works is my dad would take the bribe by telling the contractor his job was to build the buildings for the government. Instead of using cement, use half sand and half cement. The money you save, you give piece of that to me, and I'll take my piece and give it to my boss, and his boss will take the piece and give it to his boss, and then everybody in the food chain gets the money. Every 6 months, his boss will call the contractor and say, I'm not seeing any money. Is he taking it all? He said, taking it all? You know what he's asking me to do? What? He's asking me to build the building to the spec. Have you ever heard of that? If I knew, I would have never bid on it, because I'm losing my shirt. In government, you never get fired. What happens? You get transferred. Every 6 months, we moved from village to village to village until we went to the most remote villages where there was not a building to be built, because he's not taking nobody's bribery. So everybody's happy when there is nothing being done. So we sat on most places where there were no schools. We wrote on the floor. We, studied sitting on the floor. My sister went on to become a postdoctorate in applied mathematics. My brother had a PhD in statistics and computer science. I was the least educated person in my family with engineering and MBA. Came to this country with $5, didn't speak the language. And God has been absolutely kind to us. I mean, God has been so kind to us. And I look back and saying, the society gave us so much. When you are successful in life, you take so much help from every single person you come across. You realize it or not, the universe plants everything around you to make your dreams come true. And when you go up in that elevator, we always forget to send the elevator down. And what if? So I'm spending most of my life now figuring out how would I ever pay the debt back to the society. And only way I know how to do that is to take on the biggest challenges and see if God's gift I can use to solve some of the biggest problems in life. So I started this company called Moon Express, and the goal there really was, first of all, it just sounded so audacious that someone could wake up one day and say, I'm going to go to the moon. And most of us, when we are as an entrepreneur, when we get together, we're doing rah-rah thing, we're going to go to the moon, we're going to go to the moon. What if you could actually go to the moon? And especially coming from a guy who grew up looking at the moon with no food to eat. To me, that was symbolic of what is possible. And I still believe that, so we are going to be, by the way, the only company in the universe today that has a permission to leave Earth orbit and land on the moon. No other company has that. So when you think about Elon Musk and you think about Richard Branson and you think about Jeff Bezos, they're good friends. But at the same time, they are unambitious and underachievers. They're still stuck in the low Earth orbit. And Jason, this is a story that I shared with, I think, at one of the last things. I was with Richard about a couple of months ago. In fact, just came back last week from there. 2 months ago, I was at the island, and we were just talking, and his mom, Eve, was there. And I said, Eve, your son is just not very ambitious. And he says, why? He says, he's stuck. He cannot go to the moon. He's still thinking he's going to have 100 miles, 100 kilometers up, not even miles. And he's going to send people up in there, and he said, they're going to call them astronauts. I said, Eve, got to make him think big. In the evening, I'm sitting there and watching, and Richard is playing tennis. And Eve says, Ricky, come here. Ricky comes here. He says, listen to this man. This man is going to the moon. What are you going to do? Right. So my point is, it is about having those audacious dreams and making them happen. My hope is when we land on the moon, we become that seminal event, that 4 minute a mile, that when we go do that, every single person watching would say, what would I do? What is my moonshot? What would I, if a person who had no food to eat could go dream so big and land on the moon, could I solve the problem of cancer? Could I find a problem for Alzheimer's? What would I do? And that's all we have to do, is if we can really dream about the big things that we can do, it will happen. What happens is many of us are so focused on the next small incremental step. And we get our whole problem space is so small. So here is how you should look at it. When you start on day one, ask yourself the question, God forbid, if I'm actually successful in doing what I'm going to do, is it going to move the needle? Is it going to help hundreds of millions or billion people? If the answer is no, it is not worth doing it, because it takes the same amount of effort and energy to do a small problem, to solve a small problem, than to solve a big problem. So why not go out and attack a big problem? Many of us get stuck because we believe those big problems requires tremendous amount of resources to make it happen, and you got to start small. What you got to have is, if you want to solve a big problem and you want people to help to solve these big problems, you got to have those big, audacious dreams. When I start a company, I never am the person who understands a least bit about that industry. And that is really the key. that every single person you ask when they start a company say, I know nothing about it. How can I go out and solve this problem? I have never started 2 companies in the same industry, and this is my 7th one. So as you saw, space exploration, my new company is in the healthcare. The reason I'm able to get to the moon at a price point that no one could ever imagine, by the way, is under $10 million. Under $10 million. Not $25 billion it took NASA to get there. It completely changes because you are able to rethink how things should be done. And the first question when I looked at going to the moon was a guy who came to me, he said he could do it. And I said, how do you go to some place which keeps moving? I said, how do you go to the moon? It keeps moving every time I look at it. And he started explaining me these orbital dynamics. I said, whatever, you just go make it happen, right? Because my point is to ask him all types of tough questions. He said, we need to build a big rocket to go to the moon. Why do we need a big rocket for? I say in software, we don't write one big code, we write modular stuff. Why can't we have a small rocket that sits on top of another small rocket, and the cost will be so much lower if you put them in small things together? And he said, are you a rocket scientist? I'm not. I said, you're the rocket scientist. Why don't you tell me? And he thinks, it just won't work. I said, that's not what I asked. I said, tell me why it won't work. And he started thinking, and he said, holy shit, it just might work. And that is exactly what we ended up doing. Right? Same thing in healthcare. What do I know about healthcare? Nothing. I have no biology background. I don't have any science background. But we fundamentally looked at the problem very differently. Same thing, by the way, in education. So after, Jason, I'm going to just keep going on.
No, it's the easiest Q&A of all time, ladies and gentlemen, Naveen Jain.
Isn't what he said that he's going to ask me a question, I'm going to go on. So let me ask you, actually, seriously, what is it that I can help you with? So do you want to hear more about, how many people want to hear more about space? A few. How many people want to hear about health? Okay, gut. How about education?
Education.
Okay, so let's go talk about health, the gut health and education for a second here. So as I was finishing up this Moonshot, and we know we are going by this year. So by the end of this year, we will be launching a mission to the moon. So watch that space. All right. I start thinking about what is the next Moonshot I should be doing? And I start thinking about, could that be education or could that be healthcare? And I start to look at both the problems. It turns out both are identical problems. And here's why. People believe they're not working. They believe both of the healthcare system is broken and they believe the education system is broken. Turns out neither one of them is broken. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do. Our education system was designed for what? It was designed to teach you a skill, and you could use that skill for the rest of your life, and everything was wonderful until the exponential technologies came about. What happens in exponential technology? Every single skill that you learn today becomes obsolete in 5 years or 7 years. And if that happens, what do you get? A chronic unemployment. I'm going to come back and say how to fix that. In healthcare system, it was designed for at the time when people were dying from infectious diseases. They came up with a system that says when you are sick, you go to the hospital or doctor, they give you the medicine, you come back, and life was wonderful. What do we have now? The chronic diseases. That means you're always sick. The system wasn't designed for you to be always sick. It was episodic. In fact, here is the irony of the whole thing. The cure for the infectious diseases, antibiotics, is what actually caused the chronic diseases. So the cure is what caused what we are. And here is the fundamental change that happened into the human body. Until about 30, 40 years ago, in fact, even most people believe today, the best human body is the one that is completely sterile. If you can get rid of all these pesky bacteria and viruses from human body, we will be the perfect human being. What they didn't realize is nature did not build us like that. So here is what surprised me the most. If you look at ourselves as a human body, less than 1% of the genes that are expressed in our body come from our own DNA. Think about it. So we are so proud that we are our genes. Our mom and dad gave us our genes that makes us who we are. Turns out 99% of the genes that are expressed are from the microorganisms in your gut. 99%. And here's very interesting. Now, being a dad, that really sucks if you ask me, that mom and dad were supposed to be half and half partner in the kids. It turns out we are talking about that 1%, we are half and half. The rest of the 99% comes from mother. And here's why. When the child is born, the first exposure to the microorganism comes from the birth canal. And that's where the child is exposed. So despite how proud we are as a dad, our kids are really the product of our mother. Right? But in fact, it's so strong that these microorganisms, in fact, impact everything in our body. Today, if you look at the research in the last 5 years, every single chronic disease, by the way, so if you Google Parkinson's in the gut, that tells you the Parkinson's actually starts in the gut, not in your brain. Autism, Alzheimer, obesity, autoimmune diseases, heart disease, every single disease you can think of. In fact, including not only cancer, the cure for cancer, whether you use chemotherapy or immunotherapy, whether it works or does not work, depends on your microorganism. So there was a very recent research published actually even in the Wall Street Journal that showed the people that when they do chemotherapy, it works for some people and doesn't. It really depends on your gut bacteria. So a lot of people say, well, I know about microbiome a lot. What is so new about it? Here's what's new about it. The current technology that you do the microbiome test, and I'm not bashing anyone, whether it's like a UBiome, American Gut Project, all of them, they're all absolute waste of time and money. And here's why. Today's technology, they use something called 16S sequencing. 16S is a gene in bacteria only. And at that level, most bacteria have that gene. However, depending on a different genus, is slightly different. So when you measure at 16S, you get about 50% to 70% of all the bacteria in your gut and only get them at a genus level. What's the genus level? So if you were to ask me, say, Naveen, can you tell me a little bit about India at a genus level? I would say, well, yeah. There are some men, there are some women, there are some children, there are some old people, there are some young people. And say, well, that's just like America. And the answer is, yeah, at a genus level, it looks the same. So when you do the current microbiome test on any two people, 97% is the same. So why bother? When you look at the technology that we got was very interesting, by the way. This is something I want to share with you. Our government spends hundreds of billions of dollars of our taxpayer money doing all kinds of research for national security, NASA, and energy. All this thing is available to you at no cost. Anything you want, you can, as a US citizen, you can go there and get what you want. I was sitting at Los Alamos National Lab, where they spend billions of dollars building a technology that was designed for the national security, for the biodefense work. What they were trying to figure out was, if there is a bad actor and they do something biological warfare, or they throw the biological bomb, how would we ever know what made us sick? So they came up with a technology that said, what if we could look inside the body and we can find out what is making you sick? We will know exactly what the bad people did. And I looked at that and I'm thinking, oh my God, what if we can take that technology now, if we know what's making them sick, what if we can keep them healthy? And so we licensed that technology. And you know how much it cost me? $0. And they spent hundreds of millions. I think they claim multi-billion dollars on it. And it's now, what that technology does is very, very interesting. It looks at tiny, literally, I would say, it just dip in the stool and put in the thing and send it. And it looks at every organism. We're not talking about just the bacteria at a genus level, not even at the species level. Every strain of every bacteria, every virus, whether it's the DNA virus, RNA virus, or a bacteria phages. The phages are, by the way, I don't know how many people know about the bacterial phages. The phages are the viruses that only attack the bacteria, not the humans. We see them. We see the yeast. We see the mold. We see the fungus. And we see the human RNA. The beauty of this whole thing is, we are finding the diseases like asthma actually is a fungus in the gut. Celiac disease of gluten, it comes from an RNA virus called reovirus. We're finding the viruses and these parasites and mostly the yeast and the fungus and the molds that are causing many of the chronic diseases. So imagine if the biggest blockbuster drug was simply the right diet and nutrition. And it's personalized for each one of us. But here's the thing. Honestly, I know you're probably thinking, oh, I've heard that thing before. What's happening is, anytime there is a new science, the first people who adopt are the people who are going out there trying to make quick money. They come up with this Atkins diet, the paleo diet, and this diet and that diet. Guess what? At the strain level, at the RNA level, not only we know what these organisms are, we know what actually they're doing. Are they producing short-chain fatty acids? Are they producing vitamin D? Are they producing vitamin K? Everything we know what nutrients are being produced. At that level, even our DNA, we talk about DNA, any two people, 99.5% of our DNA is same. In fact, me and the plant, 90% of our DNA is the same. When you look at a microbiome at a strain level, less than 5% is same. So how can the same diet work for two people? So here's a very interesting one. I have been thinking of eating healthy because I'm trying to lose the last 10 pounds. And my blood glucose level is pre-diabetic. I cut down all the carbs. I was told the carbs are the enemy, right? No carbs. Gluten is your enemy. So I cut down all the gluten, all the starch. I'm a vegetarian, so all I'm eating is now lentils, legumes, tofu, beans, and vegetables. Nothing, my weight is not going down, my glucose is not going down. I start cutting down the size, and now I'm down to almost starvation, and I cannot figure out what to do. Nothing has worked. I finally did the test when I went to Los Alamos. It turns out my body digests carbs well, not the protein. And I switched over to eating carbs, lost 2 pounds, and my blood glucose came down. Think of my wife needs to cut down the carbs and she needs to eat more lentils and legumes, but I was the one now eating all the carbs, right? But who would have thought about that, right? And to me, the reason I mention this is that no two people are really alike and no two diets are going to work for anyone. So really thinking about what we could do. My goal here at Viome, which is the company I just launched, is create a world where chronic disease becomes a matter of choice, not a matter of bad luck. Because there is no one should ever suffer from a chronic disease. In fact, here's a very interesting thing. Chronic diseases don't happen overnight, unlike infection. They happen over time. It takes 10 years, 15 years for chronic disease to develop. That means it's happening because your body is in constant stress, constant inflammation for a very long time based on the diet and the things you're feeding it. What if you can reverse that? There is no doubt in my mind, if we work together, we'll be able to create a world where no one will ever get sick. And the technology now exists, and we are using a lot of the artificial intelligence to actually to be able to digest all the information and find where you are in the cycle of getting sick and reverse it completely. So my hope is not one day we will live forever, but I can tell you one day we will live healthy forever. Right. Thank you. Education. I'm not.
Once we touch on education, I'm going to open it up to a few people.
Let's
cool?
go. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Go. No, so I'm not going to talk about education. I'm going to have somebody ask me the question.
Okay. Do you want to, where's the little foam thing? Is your question about education?
No.
We'll go first.
No,
Okay,
no. It's okay. Seriously. What are we?
Tell me about education.
No. Seriously. We'll do that offline. We'll do that offline. Let's go talk about what are the people's in mind.
Carl.
So this test,
Yeah.
Is it open to market?
Yes.
So where do people go if they want to take it?
Viome.com, Viome.com, and you sign up. Actually, it's very interesting. It's a $99 a month. I'm not trying to sell something. This is not my job here, right? But the interesting thing is, it happens your body is changing all the time. So as we recommend the diet and recommend nutrition for you, it changes, your body changes every 3 months. So we test you every 3 months. So we keep testing you until your body is constantly optimized, and we just constantly need to keep it tuned, just like a car. You can't just say stop, right? You stop, the body stops. So you say, we do 4 times a year test, and we constantly make a recommendation. And AI is constantly monitoring what's going on inside your body.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Another question? Chris?
Awesome.
Thank you for your talk. I'm very excited about what you're doing. You talked about stool testing.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing stool testing, you're looking largely at what's happening in the large intestine. And most of the interesting things happen in the small intestine. So you talked about carbohydrate absorption there. That's not happening in the large intestine.
Sure.
That's happening in the small, maybe even in the mouth.
Sure. Yeah.
So
we do both the things. The part I just didn't quite get to is that we both look at the metabolic side and the gut side. So the 2 tests, we do the metabolic intelligence that looks at how your body is digesting different types of food. That comes from your immune system, your intestine, and also from your mitochondrial functions.
Right.
So we are looking at, we are adding the things called like blood transcriptome that will look at all the 13 genes of mitochondria. So we know exactly where you are in your body. We look at every single transcript of inflammation with the CRP and the cytokines. We look at every single thing that is going inside your body at a molecular level. I just didn't want to go through too much detail, but the answer is yes. We look at all of that stuff. Yes.
that's very tight. And can you name the technology? So you mentioned 16S. Is there an equivalent that you're doing?
A transcriptome. It's called RNA sequencing. Transcriptome.
Okay.
So metagenomics is around measuring the DNA.
Right.
And measuring the RNA is called metatranscriptome technology.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Next question. We got Dan all the way. Also, Cole and then Dan. That's the easiest way to get it.
Nobody wants to talk about space, huh?
I like space. My question is, you're doing so well in so many different industries.
Yeah.
What's the common denominator, or what's your why, or why you made your first billion? Why didn't you just stop then? Why are you as ambitious as you are? What are you trying to create?
Well, so again, it's not, if, making money is not the end goal. Making money is a byproduct of doing things that you really enjoy doing, right? So if you focus on it, you never get it. So like making money is like having an orgasm. If you focus on it, you're never going to get it.
Alrighty then.
Dan Martell, ladies and gentlemen.
Speaking of orgasms, no. How do you build your companies when you think of, like, obviously you start with a compelling why, the billion, but then what's your thought process of team, problem space, and timeline?
So essentially, once you can set out this audacious goal, it's amazing things happen. If your purpose is so big that people can get attached to it, amazing people come and join you. So in fact, I can tell you this why I'm very recent. I had nobody, in fact, for the last 5 or 6 companies, I had the same team that I worked with. And the last company, I just sold the last 2 companies. And I say, you know what, guys, you've been working with me for too long. You know everything that I know. Go out and start your own company. And I got all 6 guys to go start their own company. And they've been doing amazingly well. So I needed to build my new team. So I said, I'm going to work with people. I'm going to find the best and the brightest. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put out a goal out there. I am going to create a world where sickness is optional. And people start to call me, who is this guy? What is he trying to do? The first person I hired was a woman named Dr. Helen Massier. She has a PhD in microbiology, MD, functional medicine, and then she joined Craig Venter, the guy who did the first human genome sequencing, wants to have human longevity, about living forever. He's the guy who built the first artificial life, the man who played God. He's in the cover of Time magazine, right? She talks to me and says, oh my God, what you're trying to do will fundamentally change everything. She quit and joined me. I was now saying, I need to get the artificial intelligence. So I basically went to the press and I say, think about it. If we had 1 million people and we knew exactly what is going inside our body, not a single human being can analyze it. I need someone who could build the artificial intelligence that will find the pattern that people didn't even know to look for. And the head of the Watson research called me. He says, I will do it. And he quit and joined me, right? So my point is, the guy who were at lab that built the technology, he said, you know what? I don't need the security or the government job. I'll come and make it happen. right? So point is, I built the team because there was so audacious goal that purpose people can align with. And if you have a great purpose, the great people will come and join you. What happens is when your purpose is small and you're saying, well, I want to make my business from $1 million to $10 million, and people say, well, that's not my goal. That's your goal, right? Building another $10 million is not going to satisfy me. If I'm going to give up something good, I want something so audacious that if that happens, it will be my legacy, right? So remember, if all of you who are doing well, just remember one thing. Until you let something good fall apart, you're never going to get something better to come together.
I got chills. Philip.
Can you go a bit deeper on ambition? I mean, you're very ambitious, but you're so ambitious it's almost normal. It's simple to you, and you speak about it in such an organic way. And one could argue that we all have ambition, but like, what's the why behind the ambition? If you could go deeper on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as I mentioned that it is the why comes from a very simple fact. I have debts to pay. I am trying to find out what can I possibly do that will change the lives of a billion people. And my fundamental belief is a non-profit or giving money is not the solution. In fact, if you want to do a small good in the world, you give money. If you want to do large good in the world, you create profitable companies. So if you read, I've just been writing about it, is why entrepreneurs are going to become the next superpowers, not the nation states. And I can give you basically the hypothesis behind it. So I just wrote an article in CNBC and in the Inc. magazine. It talks about entrepreneurs being the next superpowers. And here's why. Now the entrepreneurs are actually doing the things that used to be in the domain of the nation states, whether it is solving the healthcare problem, solving the education problem, solving the national security, going to space. All of these things are now being done by entrepreneurs, not by nation states. Number two, entrepreneurs can be held accountable every single day, not every election cycle. You elect an idiot, you're stuck with that idiot for 4 years, right? Whereas an entrepreneur, you step out of the line 1 minute, you are cut off. You saw Uber. When they sent the people, when people were protesting against immigration, they sent the Uber there. 200,000 people deleted Uber that day. And Travis quit the Trump's administration's advisory board. Everybody falls in line when essentially entrepreneurs keep them responsible. Number three thing is, no longer the resources need to be bound by the geographical boundaries. People come from all around the world who will work with you because no longer you need to be in the same location to work together. And the fourth thing is a capital. Capital is not patriotic. Capital goes where the opportunities are. You create opportunity in India, people will invest in India. You create opportunity in the small town in Omaha, they will go out and essentially fund the company that's out there. No longer. So Moon Express is funded by entrepreneurs in China, entrepreneurs in Russia, entrepreneurs in Europe, entrepreneurs in India, entrepreneurs in America. It didn't matter where the company was based. People came up together and saying, we want to change, we want to save the humanity from extinction. Because if we don't go to the moon or Mars or beyond, we are all on this single spacecraft called planet Earth. One day this planet is going to get hit by something else. And we're all going to be dinosaurs. And who wants to be a dinosaur? Think about it. If you could hear the dinosaurs rolling in their graves, you know what they would be saying? They wish there was one good, great entrepreneurial dinosaur could have taken them to the moon and they would still be alive, right? And so that to me is really about, people ask me, what are you going to bring from the moon? How much is going to be what? How much quantity you're going to bring back? And they forget the simple thing. They're taking it for granted that we're going to go to the moon. Think about that. They're asking you, what are you going to do? As opposed to, how are you going to do that? And I always tell people, when I say I'm going to the moon, you say, holy shit! You're going to go to the moon? Not ask me how much quantity of what am I going to bring. And the second question that really puzzles me is, if you bring all that platinum, don't you think the prices of platinum is going to come down? And I'm thinking, if I have so much platinum that I can impact the worldwide prices of platinum, you don't need to shed tears from me.
We'll probably take 2 more questions. We got Joey.
You talked a lot about your, if you will, your openness to approaching problems in a different way and kind of asking the questions. Could you speak a little bit as to, since I'm guessing you believe that's a very important skill to have, how you try to instill that skill either in your children and or your employees?
Yeah, so, being, first of all, if you are good at what you do, you are an expert in your field, you can obviously make an incremental improvement of 10% and 15%, you will do better than anyone else. But if you come from outside the industry and you're a complete non-expert, you're able to look at the problem from a very different perspective, and that's where the disruption happens. Disruption never happens when you're looking, what I would say, thinking outside the box. You just need to think in a different box. You take the knowledge from one box and you apply that in a different box, not just coming out of the box and rethinking in the same box again. So you're not outside the box, you're thinking in a completely different box. In terms of instilling the thing is to really know that never be afraid to fail. Think so big that people think you're crazy, and never ever be afraid to fail. And what I mean by that is that as an entrepreneur, you never fail until you give up. Every single ideas may or may not work, and every idea that does not work is simply a stepping stone to a bigger idea and a bigger success. And you only fail when you give up. Everything else is just a pivot. So just pivot. If it doesn't work, just keep adapting yourself. So the way I go to our team and say, look, it doesn't matter what sports you look at, what sports you think about. You look at the basketball. For a time, I owned NBA Sonics with Howard Schultz. So it was fun to watch. I never watched sports. And I'll tell you some really interesting story. One day I got a call from Howard Schultz. I don't have a story like Shab does, but this is an interesting one. One day I get a call from Howard Schultz and Howard says, Naveen, I want to come talk to you. I said, sure, come on over. And he said, we should buy Sonics. I said, oh, sure, let's go buy Sonics. And then I'm thinking, Sonics, what kind of software they write? He said, no, they don't write software. They're a basketball team. I said, basketball team? Sounds interesting. How do they make money? And he said, no, they don't make money, they lose money. I'm puzzled now. I said, Howard, come here. So I say, now this is my non-practical joke. So I said, Howard, you are a goddamn Jew, I'm Indian. We don't invest our money in things that don't make money. What the fuck is going on? He said, really simple. When you sell the team, you make a lot of money. I said, I'm in. So we bought the team. And now one of the things I learned while I was watching the team was the best players. I watched Kobe Bryant. There are nights he would take only 3 or 4 shots. All of them will go in. At the end of the day, his score was 8, 10 points. Other nights I saw him take 50 shots and miss half of them. And he will have 50, 60 points on the board. And that was a life lesson. Unless you're willing to miss half the times you do things you do, you'll always be an 8-point man. So if you ever want to be a 50-point man, you get comfortable with missing half the shots.
Okay, I was going to end it on that. That was good, but we'll take 2 more real quick ones.
You obviously have a crazy vision. What are some tips or what practices do you follow to get your entire team to follow that vision, even if they show up on day one, they're like, he's nuts. So
honestly, a lot of people here are very process-oriented, and I am actually not the process guy. To me, you want to inspire people. You want to inspire people to be at their best. You want to align them with the ultimate goal, not how you get there. And you allow each one of the person to find their own way to get there and make their own mistakes to get there. If you start to tell them what processes they need to be doing, then they'll start to think like you, right? So the thing that I learned about hiring a team is when you're looking for a friend, you want someone who is just like you. When you are looking for team members, you want people who are very unlike you. If you are the rah-rah guy, you want a guy behind you who does not rah-rah, who simply says, I have no idea what you're trying to do, but I'll keep collecting the trees, you keep cutting them. But the guy who builds the road after you keep burning the forest, right? So you want to find people who have very complementary skills around you. You may not enjoy drinking beer with them, but they will be a great company with them.
Beautiful. All right, we're going to end it there. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Naveen
Thank you,
Jain,
sir.
thank you. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. That was wonderful.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for season 1 of the Community Made podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I would be forever grateful if you got the word out by sharing it with a friend, rating it on iTunes, or leaving a review. Next season, we'll be doing a showcase of sorts, a reviewer of the week at the end of every episode. So to be considered, simply leave an honest review on iTunes. If you care to share your thoughts or your biggest takeaways with me, you know I love hearing them. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Jason Gaynard, JAYSONGAIGNARD, or email me, Jason, JAYSON, at communitymade.com for show notes or any additional resources that we may have mentioned in this episode. Visit the Community Made group. If you're not a member, come on now, get it together. It's free. Simply visit communitymade.com to get access. You know I love and appreciate your support, and I cannot wait to share season 2 with you in a few short weeks. I'll see you then.